Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to wait for a few more minutes to let people joining us, and we'll start shortly. Okay, so I think we are going to start. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome from Bangkok to this thematic session on multi-stakeholder network and platform enabling co-creation of knowledge and participatory research for supporting family farmers and food system transition. So this thematic session has been organized and will be facilitated by Dr. Petcris Orencio, who is a program head in the Research and Thought Leadership Department at the South Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture, CIRCA in short, and myself. So my name is Pierre Ferrand, and I'm an agriculture officer at the FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. So very much welcome to everybody on our behalf. Our session today is organized around 6 presentations, which was selected from the papers we received ahead of the consultation through a call for communication. And as you will see, they are quite diverse and covered a wide range of topics. However, they are all related to the importance of fostering multi-stakeholder network and platform to create favorable conditions for the co-creation of knowledge and bottom-up research processes. So we believe that these are critical to implement and promote inclusive and transformative agroecological approach. Each of the presenter will be given 15 minutes to share the key messages of his or her communication. And we will have a series of 2 presentations, one after the other. Then a discussant will provide a short commentary over the 2 communications. And finally, we should have a bit of time for question and answer session after each 2 communications. Before we start, I would like to remind all the panelists to keep their microphone muted when they are not speaking, and for participants to use extensively the chat box and the Q&A box in order to submit their comment or question. So we're going to start now, and the first presentation will be on the role of actor network in enabling agroecological innovation. Lessons learned from 15 years of on-field application in the northern upland of Laos. And for this, I will ask Jean-Christophe Castella to take the floor. He is a senior scientist with the French Institute of Research for Development, IRD, specialized in agricultural and livelihood system analysis. So Jean-Christophe, the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Pierre. So I won't have to introduce the topic anymore. As you say that based on our 15 years field research in the northern uplands of Laos, we pointed to the key role of actor networks in enabling agroecological innovations. And so that's the story I will tell you now, based on our experience there. And I will use the concept of agricultural innovation systems that are network of organizations and individuals together with infrastructure and institutions that affect the way different agents interact, access and exchange and use agricultural knowledge. And this is an heritage somehow from a legacy from a long history of development practices from farming system research in the 80s that were centered on disciplinary and multidisciplinary approaches, trying to transfer technical package through universities and research institutions acting as expert institutions. Then we moved in the 90s to agricultural knowledge and information systems based on knowledge co-production and disseminations, where the posture of the ARIs were partners of farmers extension service and NGOs, inducing behavioral changes. While in the most recent changes in intervention patterns in the years 2000, we moved on to transdisciplinary research and those multi-actor platform that we discussed today, where all economic actors are collaborating and the ARIs are becoming somehow facilitators of a negotiation process, building up capacity of partners to innovate. And what does it mean when those agricultural innovation systems deal with agroecology more specifically? So that's one at the center of my presentation today. That actor network, when they mainstream the principles and practices of agroecology to transition toward agroecosystem resilience and farming system and food system transformation, are engaging a large number of actors. As you can see on the right-hand side, extension, traders, input suppliers, farmers are working together toward common objectives. And here at the bottom part of the presentation, I present the principles, the 10 principles of agroecology as they've been promoted since 2018. And that point to what makes those agroecology innovation systems so special. So they are systematically co-constructed with local actors, as you can see at the bottom, co-creation and sharing of knowledge, and they are location specific. So the performance and the diffusion of the agroecological innovations involve a dimension of adaptation to local contexts and depend on the enabling conditions. They also relate to an expansion of the scope. When you go from the center of the diagram at the bottom to the periphery, we go from farmer fields to food system and to the society in general. And so what it means is that those transformative approaches that we propose are not only focused on farmers and their fields or the farm and small region, but to but engaging the all partners in redesigning the overall socio-ecological system. And last point related to these principles of agroecology is that this scaling question lead to a need for knowledge integration beyond field and farm to consider larger aspects of development related to political aspects, economy, governance, infrastructure. So we somehow enlarge the scope of the innovation systems when we deal with agroecology. And we can capture these changes through this actor intervention matrix that we used to characterize a number of case study sites that we develop in northern Laos. So some interventions are so-called push interventions, as they engage these actors with incentives, financial, technical, material incentives that support activities on the ground. And on the other hand, on the right-hand side, we have the enablers. So all the support to the actors to create this enabling economic, institutional, and cultural environment that will support the mainstreaming of agroecological principles and practices. And so we can characterize any actor network related to agroecology by using this matrix. So who are the actors and what kind of push and pull support we introduce through our activities in the field. And so if we want to get into more detail of what kind of activities are related to push on the top or to pull enabling activities, we have listed here a number of examples. So providing material assets or financial assets, like creating a village fund, a credit scheme, providing equipment through a project, are called push incentive from our perspective, or providing technical advice like and support to extension services. On the other hand, we have the enablers, which are levering aspects related to market structure, to soft institutions like creating farmer groups or supporting new regulation laws, or physical infrastructure related to building schools, banks, and networks that are physically embedded in the development system. And here, to illustrate that process, we used 7 so-called agroecology innovation systems that are spread across a large area in the northern part of Laos. So you can see here the project number 1 that was related to mainstreaming conservation agriculture in the southern part of Sayaburi province in Laos and Xieng Quang province. Then a project named Catch Up for comprehensive analysis of trajectories of changes in the uplands that was focusing at some stage on farmer groups and cooperatives and supporting the design of participatory land use planning approaches. Then it was followed by a project on creating a fund on conservation agriculture development that was fed by the a tax system that was put in place to collect $1 per ton of maize that was crossing the border between Laos and Thailand, and that was that tax managed by the provincial finance system of the Sayaburi province was supporting extension services related to agroecology in the province. And then there was support of a project, the Northern Upland Development Project, to technical service center at the village cluster level, extending a number of technical innovations related to conservation agriculture, agroforestry, SRI, so system of rice intensification, and others. And then there was the EFICAS project, eco-friendly intensification system for the 3 provinces, Luang Prabang, Wapan, and Pongsali in northern Laos, that was developing a landscape approach to agroecology, so promoting a number of diverse agroecology practices that were adapted to the different compartments of the landscape. Then there was the support of the provincial authorities of Xieng Quang province to support farmers in developing agroecology practices, and then an enlarging of this whole process at the national level through the Lao Upland Initiative that would engage a number of partners in involved in research and development in the northern part of Laos to share knowledge and lessons from their respective agroecology related activities in the northern part of Laos. And so when we look at the timeline of these activities, we can see that they were umbrella project development programs, like the capitalization program on agriculture and rural development, and the agroecology innovation system that I just described were hosted somehow by this umbrella program. The Northern Upland Development Program came later on. And then they succeeded to each other, so that the lessons from one innovation system were brought to the next one, and so that the impact evaluation that were embedded in the project or that were conducted independently from each project could somehow point to weaknesses of the previous actor network that were somehow managed in the next actor network in time. And so there was some kind of building up of knowledge and experience of all actors involved in this actor network over the 15 years of this story I'm telling you now. One important aspect also of these projects is that they involve a change in scale and an integration of scale, starting from local to provincial scales at the initial level and moving gradually in time toward provincial to national level. So there was this scale enlargement, and also this gradual move from initially push project, so creating incentive for farmers to adopt agroecology practices, to toward more creating enabling conditions for change through more policy, knowledge sharing, support to farmer groups and cooperatives at a later stage of the process. And here I illustrate very rapidly on two examples how we documented this case study. So one case study was the Pass project on supporting mainstreaming conservation agriculture in Sayaburi and Siengkwang province in the early 2000s. And here what we can see is that we have the research and development partners, the policy, the extension services, input suppliers, individual farmers who were involved, but some other sectors of the society were not involved in that project. And then we can see also that all the activities that were implemented, when we look at the matrix, were essentially push activities. So providing incentives for farmers, while the Conservation Agriculture Development Fund that came at a later stage and was collecting tax to support the extension system in the province, involve a different kind of actors, like traders and input suppliers. The private sector was much more involved in that process, and as a result, there was a better balance between the push and pull activities, as you can see, as is illustrated in this representation of the matrix. This combination of incentives and enabling conditions to change did create a good condition for change, but we'll see later on that unfortunately they did not survive the end of the project. And when we combine all these agroecology information, agroecology innovation systems, we can see that the different actors have play a key role, but not always involved to the same degree in all projects. And if we would combine all the innovation systems, of course, we will see all actors really being engaged in the process. Unfortunately, they were spread in time, and they succeeded to each other. And what we did through that study was to point to the strengths and the weaknesses of these successive networks in time, so that we could guide future improvements in the design of the future agroecology innovation systems. So what are the main results of our comparative analysis? Is that the research institutions play a key role in all the networks that were identified, as shown in the previous slide, that there was a process of upscaling grounded in the detailed understanding of the local context, and that was key to the success of all these networks, and that there was a gradual learning process over time from one network to the next. We were documenting lessons and trying to draw lessons from moving from one to the other. And so that we also saw this movement from initially a push toward pull activities, and this enlargement of the agroecology scope from field, farm, incentive-related activities toward food system, societal change, and more enabling levers of change. We observe scale integration, and we analyze this agroecology innovation system as learning organizations, enhancing the capacity of all actors to collaborate meaningfully in their respective networks. So what are the take-home messages from this experience? First is that the agroecology innovation systems are learning organizations. They should be highly adaptive, context-specific, and we realize that this very big umbrella program that hosts those initiatives somehow are challenging this flexibility as they are highly bureaucratic, having a big metabolism and administration. It somehow creates a constraint to the flexibility and agility that is necessary for these learning organizations that are the agroecology actor networks. Second take-home message is related to actionable research that is at the core of these innovation systems. So it's very important to design and nurture alternative practice in innovation niche, which are push approach, while creating at the same time through pull activities and enabling environment for upscaling. And then there is this important aspect of building up knowledge in time, which require mechanisms to store the knowledge, to keep the memory of those innovation systems as they evolve in time, so that we can bring the lessons from one to the next through dissemination of the lessons from this innovation system through some kind of educational system. Another take-home message is related to the innovation capacity, which is ultimately the capacity to network that is at stake here. And so it's very important to point to enhance the capacity of actors and actor network to think and act in complexity. This requires a collective intelligence, not only promoting new practice and processes. Really at the heart of agroecology innovation systems, there is learning, cooperation, and care. So these are capacity that contrast very sharply with the prevailing competition, compartmentation, and individualistic behavior that we see in many projects those days. Then another point is related to the values and belief that the members of the network share. And this is very important to build up on shared values. and to build up those shared values in time. As we have seen that very often at the end of projects, it's very important to retain those values that were at the core of the project, so that they can be brought to the next phases of the project by the same actors. So the lessons from pool interventions, such as the Conservation Agriculture Development Fund or the Lao Upland Initiative, pointed to the limits of project-driven innovation systems. Also, the projects tend to create a diversity of niches that do not challenge the socio-technical system in place. Very often, these niches are designed by the system itself. But if we want to promote innovation, somehow we face situations where we are challenging the socio-political system in place. And here, what happens very often is that those initiatives are stopped by the system or put under many constraints so that they cannot really be mainstreamed. And this is a problem we face many times, that at the end of the project, only the political correct aspects of the lessons learned are brought to the next level, and sometimes the challenging one are kept under the radar. And as conclusion, I would like to point to the importance of a pluralistic approach to agroecology innovation systems, which should spread risk and promote innovation capacity. I like to also present these innovation systems as learning organizations that accept that some intervention will succeed, some other may fail, and that was the case in the story I told you over 15 years in northern Laos. Some failed, but they brought many lessons anyway, and so that was important to bring those lessons to the next level from this learning process we went through. And then this last point is that the agricultural research institution always play an important role in supporting the bonding networking activities, so within multi-actor networks, and bridging network activities, so between multi-stakeholder networks, that are very essential to scaling agroecology innovations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe, for this very interesting presentation. Now we'll have another communication, and then there will be a moment for discussion. So the next presentation is on empowering communities to drive experimentation to support agroecological transition in collaboration with extension system and farmer organization. The presentation has been elaborated by Marie-Aude Evin, Senior Regional Technical Specialist in IFAD, Suzanne Phillips, Farmer Field School and Community Adaptation Specialist in FAO, and Katusha Farah, Senior Climate Service and DR Advisor in WFP. Today, I think it's only Marie-Aude and Suzanne who will present, so you have the floor and 15 minutes. Marie-Aude, you are still connected? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm connected.
Perfect.
Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Okay, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. So as mentioned, this is I will present we will present the results of a collective effort that was initiated ever since Adaptation Future 2021 this year, and that we've continued to discuss it with a large group of colleagues from IFAD, FAO, WOCA, TCRAF, WFP, and projects along COP26 and Asset Conference and this conference. So next. So the presentation will be in three parts. I'll try to provide a relatively quick overview of the papers and approaches, and we'll delve into two examples, and then we'll discuss the lessons learned and approaches for scaling community-driven approach. Next. So first, why do we need community-driven approach? I think in this attendance, you all know why. There are diverse agroecological systems and different enabling environment, different farmers, intra-household diversity. Solutions must be sustainable, so they need to build on local ecosystem and biodiversity, which is local by essence. Climate change, the impacts are very locally specific, sometimes not the same from one community to the other, a field to the other field, and they vary in time. In addition, if we want them to be sustainable, as just been explained in the previous presentations, the solution must be owned and sustained by communities. So all in that, we have to deal with an incredible amount of diversity. So as presented, we cannot imagine again top-down solutions, but we need to empower communities themselves to drive experiment and drive sustainable transitions. So community-driven approach is essential. Next. So here, I will also present that this community-driven approach are also at the heart of IFAD activities and different approach as well, such as agroecology. We conducted a recent evaluation of our project on community-driven approach. And it said that about 28% of Asian IFAD projects include financing of community-driven development, including financing by the communities themselves. The evaluation showed that these projects are more effective. They tend to be more holistic, addressing also gender, indigenous people, biodiversity, climate, and even though they are more complex at first, they are as efficient, value for money. Then this year, we conducted a stock take on agroecology. Over 200 projects were screened to see how we are consistent with the overall integrated approach of agroecology, looking at the farm level, the landscape level, the markets, and the policy, as you can see on the left, the 4 pillars that were screened. So what we saw is that 77% of our projects that include production, investment in production, have a number of principal agroecological principles, that agroecological projects are indeed more essential, and that community-driven approach are an essential part of this agroecological approach, both the farm, the landscape, the market, the policy. But as indicated, there is always big challenges in sustainable institutionalization and scaling. That is why this is the heart of the paper and reflections. Next. So yes, so what we reviewed first with this community of actors and partners, we try to review what are the kind of approach that can empower communities to drive locally relevant food systems transitions, putting at the center, you can see it at the center, empowered community and producer decisions. So really the focus is how can we empower communities to take informed decision and to have experiential learning based on actual experience. So we identify 4 broad areas. On the left, tools and approach that promote ecological literacy, local weather advisory, mapping, local climate plans, and so on. Then approach that really fosters and support farmers to experiments, such as along farmer field school, participatory farm demonstration and comparison. Then another pillar, interesting one, is also to empower the farmers themselves to take records and analysis, such as along agroecological logbook and farmer diary. And finally, an important pillar, as we've mentioned, is the co-creation of knowledge and documentation. Next. So now we'll go into 2 quick examples. Next. We have many examples in the paper. So I'll just give an overview, for instance, of the IFAD project in India, GTEL, that has managed to bring at scale localized climate planning and agroecological solutions. They have a very community-driven process, starting left one, the first part of the quadrant on community-driven consultation to really ensure joint crop selections. Then based on the specific situations of the community and the preference, they developed a number of proposed package of practices and cropping calendars and so on. And they train local facilitators to support the communities to test, try, And then mixed cropping strategies also were taken as backup. So really an integrated agroecological approach and different investment in parallel for local farm equipment and market. And as a result, over 211,000 households have adopted and replicated. They doubled income as well as cultivated land as they were able to recoup new land. The lessons were that it takes time to empower communities and local facilitators, that we need to blend science and local knowledge, that it was key to encourage farmers themselves to experiment. For instance, you were sharing how they've trained the farmers to be able to measure a small section of their farm, to measure the yield and being able to compare novel practices, old practices, local knowledge. And that was really key to adoption. Encouraged, and then the inclusive last mile delivery was really core for the sustainability, and they are moving now towards youth organizations and so on, as well as digital innovations. So now I'll give the floor to Suzanne to also provide the experience from the Farmer Field School. Over.
Hi, everyone. So yes, how do we use community-led innovation approaches to support farmers to join in the agroecological transition? I'll give the example of farmer field schools and how these have been applied to agroecology and how we try to go to scale. So what would happen if we got a researcher, or maybe more specifically an entomologist in this case, together with an educator who's really into adult education and knows about how adults learn, and then a farmer, and then they were together in a field that has a problem. Maybe this field is a bit degraded, they've used too much pesticide, and they're trying to think about better solutions. Maybe it's not just one farmer, but we have another one, or maybe it's not just another one, but we have 3, 4, maybe up to 25 farmers, and they are meeting together in this field and discussing about what can we do to do it better. And perhaps thanks to the experience of the entomologist, they'll set up some experiments, and then the educator will start helping them discuss, and they will meet together over a season to come back again and again and look at what could be done in experiments. Well, if we did that, and instead of calling it an educator, we call it a facilitator, what we get would be farmer field schools. So you can see in this picture of farmer field school from Indonesia, we see farmers, we see a field, we see something that makes us think about research, and then some facilitators. So farmer field school is about experimenting and learning in the field. And here are some women learning about different types of biopesticide they can test. It's about building locally adapted solutions to farmer challenges. And this means working together with research, working together with extension. In this picture from Vietnam, then as a result of the field school, different varieties of rice were tested, and also according to their taste, and then shared with local community. It's about increasing the understanding of the agroecosystem so that you can make better decisions. So here is the science field shops, also in Indonesia, adapting the field school to work on climate and understanding like rain patterns. It's about empowering the groups through this knowledge and experimentation, then they are better able to decide and to work together. And it's about healthier communities. Again, here we go back to Indonesia, and from the small farmer field school group, we get a whole community who decides to kind of restore the forest near the community. So from initially these experiments, let's say, being done in Indonesia over 30 years ago to today, we have many topics and problems that farmers and researchers and extension agents have come together to try and solve, going from integrated pest management to vegetables to cotton systems, all the way to agroecology, and going from Asia to over 90 countries in the world. We estimate that every year between 400,000 and 1 million farmers are trained through field schools. And so it is a relevant question to think how the farmer field school can support farmers in the agroecological transition. So we have some experience on how this can be done. And for sure, one of the best things is that it can be a platform for experimenting with new ways of doing things. So it means taking what some of the farmers might be doing in the area, some locally adapted innovations, what some of the researchers have been working with, and putting it together and seeing if it works. In this case, this is the Andhra Pradesh Natural Farming Program in India, where you can see a farmer experimenting with polycropping, with mulching, and in this case, farmer field schools have been integrated with other types of extension approaches to promote agroecological transition. It also means creating different systems. So not only within, not only different practices, but really thinking about reorganizing systems within the farms, but also in the communities. So here you see a case from Northern Togo in Western Africa, where, which was documented in collaboration with CIRAD, and as a result of the field school, some of the farmers in the communities decided to set up common composting areas in the community. And there were many such collective innovations that were especially strong when the groups were strong and when the experiment and the project were designed collaboratively with farmers and researchers and project teams. So groups are essential for change. They provide, having a group of farmers in field school is key, because farmers can support each other when they are working with innovations that may not be supported by the rest of the community. And this is especially the case for women who have a lower access to resources in many cases, and so they can better support each other in changing if they are together. And the foundation of all of this is the facilitators who are trained to promote this process of change. And they often come from extension agents and they are trained over a season, or they may be farmers themselves who have undergone FFS. So to conclude, how do we go from a few groups in our experience with field schools to a landscape of agroecosystem, agroecological transition? Well, it's really key to integrate the work with farmer organizations. And then we've seen that this is the case through a stock taking that IFAD is doing. It's key to collaborate with research in finding the right innovations that could be tested, but also in finding the indicators to track their performance and in documenting and capitalizing the successes of what is done to promote it at a larger scale. Complementing with simpler digital technologies and documenting, monitoring, and sharing what works, as was shared by our colleagues previously. So we have many upcoming studies on this topic that we'll be happy to share in the future. And now I give the floor back to Marie-Aude for some lessons learned.
Yes. So now I'll move towards the lessons learned on approaches on scaling, but I'll try to go quickly because we found the same kind of lessons learned as Susan. Next, Susan. We have similar across the case. As we said on the left, one first constraint is often limited budget to implement such knowledge-intensive approach across all households and areas. So the two ways is dual approach, articulating knowledge-intensive approach with other means, with videos, with farmer network and so on, and as well as partnership and policy embedding in different programs, in network, in farmers' organization. The second challenge on the right is local capacity, because really the local facilitators in all this process are the key to success and commitment. So we need to invest in quality training, scalable training. And I really believe we have another session in parallel, but in the importance to invest in education and collaboration with long-term institutions and community of practice. On the right below is source of innovation. So as we mentioned, it's about blending internal and external scientific knowledge, practice and science, and fostering experiential learning, as well as good quality of knowledge management and network, as so as to bring the learning as evoked by Jean-Christophe earlier. Finally, the last left quadrant is how we address diversity within communities and within households. And that requires meaningful engagement, making sure to engage a different constituent, not forget the most vulnerable, even the landless, the women, and also invest in data collection that can be done at individual level and analysis, but also encouraging the farmers to experiment themselves what works best for them. And we have an interesting experience from ICRAF on that. So next, what shows transversally to that is the important role of network and digital innovations. So for instance, we collaborate with WOCAT. And I think it's very important for all of us to collaborate with existing network. WOCAT has over 20 years, 2 decades of experience trying to document in a comparable, sustainable land management practices. It has a global database online provided for everyone that is also articulated to the UNCCD convention, and that provides both approach and lessons. It provides guidelines, tested guidelines, network of experts, and so on. So these are really key to invest in scaling. Next. And now I'll just bring an experience, the importance of digital innovation. I think now digital innovations can provide us another way, not to replace at all this community-driven approach or the people behind, but to empower these communities and to help them make this bridging that Jean-Christophe evoked as well between the local process and innovation and external knowledge and the scaling up. So, but when they are well designed. So here I'll provide experience from WFP. The presentation was prepared by Pradnya and Katyushka from WFP Asia Pacific. So they gave an example in India, Odisha, of a climate tool they developed to strengthen the resilience of fishing communities. So it's a secure fishing solutions that provide a set of different advice on market, GPS tracking, government schemes, women empowerment, how to maximize yield. So tailored climate and livelihood informations, and also helping documentation of successful models to be demonstrated in other geographies for scaling. Next. So what is important also here is the lessons which are converging with a recent blueprint proposed by the COSI and several innovations on how to scale and provide well-targeted climate advisory. One is a co-creation. We also need to co-create these digital tools with communities. We need to ensure equity and inclusion, focus on the vulnerable, check what data is good for whom, how, who can be reached, who can use, what kind of data can be used and by whom. Iterative development is crucial. You need to test, see what works, adapt. And finally, it's not to replace the decision-making of the farmers and the communities, telling them the app will tell you what to do. No, it's about providing, strengthening the communities of the capacities of the communities to take decision and to have more choice and to analyze and different things. So it's farmers at the center, that the farmers decides options based on context. And finally, scalability requires close collaboration with the government and different partnership. Next. So in conclusion, so I think we could really see that community-driven approach can really help drive agroecological transitions at scale, provided it has attention to community ownership, intra-community diversities, long-term support to the last-mile implementers institutions and enabling environment, a dual approach between intensive approach and network knowledge capitalization, and we can leverage tailored digital innovations to really further scale. And we really welcome the support of academia and research to further strengthen this blending of knowledge, decision tools, and upgrade extension education and non-formal education so that they are able to really support this knowledge process and experiential learning. And we also welcome further experience from colleagues in the papers that relates this presentation. Over. Thank you very much. And apologies for too much.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much for sharing this very interesting experience from the 3 Rome-based agencies, I would say. So now I will give the floor to Dr. Peter Rosé, who is a professor and researcher on agroecology at El Colegio de la Frontera Sur, ECOSUR, in Mexico. It's a federal interdisciplinary research and graduate study institute in Chiapas, Mexico, for discussing the 2 presentations. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pierre. What I would like to do is very briefly present our research on the same topic and then relate it to the two very interesting papers. Our research group in Mexico studies farmer-to-farmer processes in scaling up peasant agroecology. And in our emblematic paper, what we did was identify the biggest, most emblematic success stories of peasant agroecology being taken to a large scale around the world, ranging from zero budget natural farming in India, which is now calculated to be more than 10 million families, to peasant to peasant or campesino to campesino in Cuba, which is now estimated to be more than 50% of the peasantry of the country, or the agroecological organic coffee boom of indigenous farmers in Chiapas, Mexico, which at one point accounted for 6% of all organic coffee traded globally. So what our approach was to look at these big success stories where small farmer, peasant agroecology achieved a big scale or was multiplied. And this is what we do in our research group on the massification or scaling of agroecology. We're trying to develop a theory of scaling. And we started our first step, and we'll continue through many other steps, has been to identify these key cases, analyze them, and try to identify what are the key drivers. And that can be lessons for other processes. So I wanted to share very quickly our conclusions without going into any detail, because I'd like to relate them to the two papers. So what we found are the key factors in achieving scale of the big emblematic success stories, where they were all based on very significant social organization. And we heard from for example, Marie-Aude, how the community-driven or community-based projects were the most successful. So this obviously goes along with our conclusion. What wasn't mentioned by either of these two papers, where we often found that social movements that bind together communities and larger processes were also typically key to the large-scale successes of farmer or peasant social movements. We found that the most successful ones were based on horizontal, consciously designed social process methodologies and pedagogies. In other words, farmers teaching farmers more than external experts teaching farmers. We found that all of the success stories were based on peasant protagonism. That is, the processes were led by their own organizations and not led by outside actors. Outside actors were important allies, whether researchers, research institutions, academics, private sector, whatever. But the biggest successes in achieving the biggest scaling up were those led by the peasant organizations themselves. Now, another key factor was that they were all based on actual agroecological farming practices that really work in a productive sense. That the organization, they were all carried out by organizations, peasant organizations, who developed a discourse that motivated their own membership. A discourse sometimes about living in harmony with nature, sometimes about spirituality, sometimes about politics, but something that motivated them. Often a political opportunity was key, and we should consider this because COVID may provide us one of the biggest political opportunities ever for scaling up agroecology. External allies, as I said, were important, although what we found is that when external allies pushed or pulled too much, to use the language of Jean-Christophe, then the peasant protagonism or leadership was lost, and the scalability was lost. And I'll get back to that in a minute. And so there's a power relation, and there has to be a correct balance. Charismatic local leaders were also important, favorable markets that give good prices to ecological produce, occasionally favorable public policies. Why only occasionally? Because there are almost no public policies around the world that are favorable to peasant agroecology. In the few cases where they were helpful, but most of the success stories were despite public policies and not as a result of public policies. And then finally, running across all of these cases was important leadership from peasant women and from peasant youth. So these are some of the key factors that we found. And so we could say that our key conclusions is that farmer organization led research and action processes. And like peasant, or what in Spanish is called campesino de campesino, it's a horizontal territorial process where peasants teach peasants and peasants learn from peasants, and peasants are doing their own innovation and research and then socializing those results, have been shown to be very successful in scaling or multiplying peasant and small farm agroecology, led by the peasant organizations themselves, but that researchers and research institutions can and should support these on-the-ground processes. But as I said, have to be careful to respect peasant organization leadership and protagonism. There's too much power dynamic on the pushing and pulling from outside. Protagonism and dynamism is lost, and generally the projects don't reach a very significant scale or duration and time. The most successful case studies from our global research project were led by peasant or community organizations, just like Marie-Aude said, and many times on horizontal pedagogies. Now, Suzanne talked about the farmer field schools. I would say that's semi-horizontal because there's the entomologist and the educator, but there are farmers exchanging with farmers. So it's kind of an intermediate point. Success stories led by researchers we did not find anywhere in terms of large scale scaling up. Nevertheless, researchers often played important roles in supporting the processes led by people's own organizations. To conclude, I'd like to recall the the Dutch-Spanish Sephardic philosopher from the 1600s, Spinoza, who told us that dependence on external actors generates fragility in processes. And this is what I'm concerned about. If the pushing and pulling from outside and is not community driven or is not coming from the peasant-led organizations, then we automatically have fragile processes. And Jean-Christophe told us about the limits of project-driven approaches and how the dynamic of power often leads important elements to be left off and left out in the next stage because they're not politically correct with dominant political power structures. So Spinoza told us to consider the difference between states of autonomy, that is people controlling their own process, versus states of heteronomy, which is when a process is controlled by outsiders, or between what he called potentia, which means the internal process of people themselves, versus potestas, which is being regulated by an external power. So in the end, in Spinozian terms, what we found in our EcoSur research is that the biggest success stories of peasant scaling up agroecology, achieving huge scales, 10 million in India, half of the farmers in Cuba, 60% of the global organic coffee, all of those cases and the others that we studied that I haven't mentioned were driven much more by potentia, that is, they were self-driven by farmer organizations, than from potestas, that means by outside actors, whether government agencies, government officials, researchers, NGOs, religious institutions. The outsiders were not responsible for the large-scale success stories. Peasants themselves were in an organized sense. And so that's kind of how I want to conclude. And then one final time, relate that to the two papers that we heard. I feel that our results are in accordance with conclusions from Jean-Christophe, for example. I feel that his paper analyzed mostly those external forces because both the pushing and the pulling was coming on the potesta side. But finally, when he talked about the limits, I would say that what he was talking about, the limits, is the same thing that we found. But when it's potestas that's driving, then it's limited. People aren't doing it for themselves. The project stops. It goes back to the previous state. There's no buy-in, as Marie-Aude and Suzanne said, and that's the end. On the other hand, when it's driven by their own organization, even supported by external actors, great, but driven by themselves through potentia, that's when it continues. And that's when it doesn't depend on the project cycle. And we have a joke in Spanish that we talk about a very severe disease in development called proyectitis agudis, or acute projectitis, meaning that processes that depend on external projects end when the external project ends, and therefore are short duration, but processes that depend on internal strength and self-organization by community organizations, as Marie-Aude said, but we find community organizations, it's not enough for really large-scale scaling. For really large-scale scaling, those community organizations have to be grouped together in much larger social movements. And people may have noticed on my initial slide that I also come from La Via Campesina, the largest social movement in the world, which represents peasants and indigenous people, where we are consciously constructing many of these scaling up processes driven by farmer, indigenous people, and community organizations themselves. And we really find that is perhaps the most important key to success, no matter how much external experts have learning and try to co-construct knowledge. Finally, what's important is are people driving the process themselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Just to add on what you just mentioned, I would like to relay a comment from Esther Penunia, the Secretary General of Asia Farmer Association, who mentioned that affirmed the analysis that organized group of farmers doing agroecology can surely scale up agroecology. And this is exactly what one of the conclusions you were mentioning. So now back to the different speakers. So I see that Marie-Aude has a hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll try to be fast. First, we don't say that only grassroots and community organizations are sufficient. On the contrary, that's what we felt. That we have the second reflections on the scaling and the role of networks and federations are key. So we completely agree with you. We need to embed this community in a larger movement, because if not, it's not enough. So I completely agree. And in the India case we presented, obviously, I mean, the self-help group federations movement plays a crucial role to scale up and scale out innovations and knowledge. So completely aligned. And as mentioned, we have a stock take by other colleagues that review the link between farmer field school and farmers organizations in Vietnam. And I think the country director is there. We've worked that the farmer facilitators are then integrated in the farmer union. So it's really a trend that we are promoting. Second, I completely agree also, you know, that we underestimate the behavioral change and the social change required for some of these things. And we had recently a discussion on scaling innovations on that. So I believe we have to work more on the behavioral change. But as you say, it's not about being dogmatic. We cannot push, just say you have to adopt agroecology. No, for me, we have another paper and we mentioned the role of women and nutrition health. We can bring, you know, objective elements and discussion, but it's about the communities experiencing and trying to find their own solutions. There is no need to be dogmatic about anything. We need to, because if not, people will reject, but we need to work with different groups and the local institutions because it has to be a movement. And I think Vijay Kumar was there yesterday on the big, large natural farming movement, and what was key to the process. And we have, yes, this other paper, there was a comment on the leadership of women and youth. And we have another paper, as you know, on how we can leverage more women network and women in scaling agroecology. So I won't elaborate, but we are also firm believer on that. I'll finish there. Over.
Jean-Christophe?
Yeah, I fully agree with the comments from Peter, and it's very, very important. The social movements are the core of these massive changes that we want to see. The big question is how we trigger those social movements and how we sustain the scaling up of those social movements. And so very often these actor networks are created as niche, and then they get bigger, and creating the conditions for them to get bigger comes from the inside. I fully agree with your point, and that's why I emphasize at the end of my presentation how important are shared values and beliefs. And this common narrative that we can develop, and that you rightly pointed, Peter, that will support the engagement of large groups into agroecology innovation. At the same time, sometime, in some countries, depending on the political situation, this social movements are constrained by the system itself. And once what is proposed goes against the political systems, it's very difficult to emerge as a movement. And then it's easier for the political people to turn it into projects managed by experts, to somehow, as Tanya Lee pointed, to technicize political questions. And so there is always this tension between the niche and the mainstreaming and getting into the large movement. And this turning point, this tipping point where the small actor network becomes a movement is very, very important to study. And we believe that it's related to shared values and beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other reaction? Suzanne, I saw that you replied to the question of Pascal regarding the cost-benefit analysis. You want to summarize in just a few sentences what you put in the chat so that everybody
she may want to also react on the comments made on farmer field school led by entomologists, because actually it's often with farmers. I don't know, just to clarify that these are not only about scientists in the field. Over.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, on the cost benefits analysis, I think there are a few studies. I quoted one of CARE International because they did a really good study, but as I said, there are some limitations to cost benefit that you all know, especially with field schools. Like often the best and the most important impact is seen over a long time. And this is also harder to document if you work with projects. So impact in terms of community empowerment and changes, maybe like 10 years later, and also harder to assess and put a value on, like gender empowerment or whatever it is, while the cost of a project are very easy to document. So, and it's also very expensive to do a very good cost benefit analysis, trying to estimate all of this, but actually it's also on our radar to do better analysis. On the entomologist, well, first of all, entomologists at the beginning, because it was more on pests, but as you saw, it changed. So it's all kind of researchers that are now involved. And I think in some cases, in farmer field school have become more like expert driven, but that was not the point at the beginning. The point at the beginning was this bridging and like creating a collaborative kind of situation in the field with farmers and researchers and others, and not one leading the other. That was the whole point. And that's why facilitators are there to kind of bridge this language. And in fact, researchers are not really in the field often, but they are mostly like advising the program. It's the facilitator who is trained to be in the field, and he creates these bridges between the different farmers and between the farmer group and other actors. And the facilitator can come from extension, but also more and more we get facilitators from farmer organization or who have done FFF. So I think now the rate is 7 farmer facilitator to every one of the extension facilitators or technical facilitators. But I find that the question of Peter of where change comes from is really interesting. In internal change and kind of, you know, just supporting what's already happening is great, but also where does change come from internally is also a question. Often it's from influences. So I think that's a kind of philosophical question in the end. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there any of the other speakers of this afternoon who wants to make a short comment regarding the two first communication, or we move to the next session? Okay, so then we will move now to the next two communication. So the first communication now, so maybe before moving to the next communication, I don't know if Peter, how long you are going to stay with us, but if you have to go, thank you very much for your contribution.
Yes, I do have to go. Thank you so much for the
very
invitation.
much appreciated your contribution. Keep in touch.
Thank you.
So the next communication presentation is about building partnership in promoting agroecology and sustainable food system, the experience of the Masipac Farmer Network and the Department of Community Development of the University of the Philippines. This will be presented by Marian Corazon Tan, Associate Professor at the Department of Community Development, College of Social Work and Community Development, University of the Philippines in Diliman. So Marian, the floor is yours and you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang umaga mula sa Pilipinas. Can I already share my presentation?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Can you see it?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I would like to share the experience on the partnership between Masipag. Masipag is a national network in the Philippines of small farmers, organizations, NGOs, and scientists practicing and promoting agroecology. And the Department of Community Development, where I teach and I come from, of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Let me start by introducing Masipag. Masipag is a farmer-led national network of small farmers organizations, NGOs, and scientists that aim to help resource-poor farmers and the organizations to attain farmers' rights over land and production. We always emphasize that it is a farmer-led network because Masipag believes that small farmers, rural women, must play decisive roles in sustainable food systems that put local food security and sovereignty as the primary goal. Masipag believes in putting people first before profit. Its approaches include bottom-up approach, farmer-to-farmer learning, farmer-led research, farmer-led advocacy and networking. Its programs include the promotion of biodiversity conservation, farmer-led breeding, diversified and sustainable agroecological systems, farmer-developed appropriate technology, organizational development, and climate change adaptability. Since, as mentioned yesterday by the speaker from ADRA, Masipag actually started as a collaborative effort to research and protect and collect indigenous rice varieties. So since 1986, a key contribution of the Masipag network has been the collection, protection, promotion of indigenous rice and corn varieties. This slide shows the more than 2,000 indigenous grain varieties which the Masipag farmers keep in their in situ lab, or what we call their trial farms, located all over the country. Masipag has also developed varieties that are adaptable to climate change through their trial farms, their participatory rice breeding. The Masipag farmers has also bred rice varieties that are resilient to flood, drought, salt, water, resistant to some local pests. Appropriate farming technologies developed by the farmers themselves are promoted by the FDAT program of Masipag, FDAT meaning Farmer Developed Appropriate Technology. These FDATs are developed through the partnership of small farmers, NGOs, and scientists and universities. Every year, Masipag holds its research forum called the Praxis. Praxis, as we know, is the synergy between theory and practice. In Masipag, Praxis is key to promoting farmer-led development of appropriate science and technology. And this year, the research forum was on FDAT for agroecological farming and food sovereignty. Masipag has also evolved its farmer-led participatory certification of their organic produce and collective marketing. From the Masipag Farmers Guarantee System, Masipag has also worked with NGOs and local government units, consumers, and social entrepreneurs, and they have formed what is now known as the PGS Pilipinas, a national formation of practitioners of participatory guarantee system. PGS Pilipinas is also a member of regional and international partnerships such as Inofo Asia, and is recognized by the IFOAM. These are international organizations promoting agroecology as well. Masipag also works with government, especially local government units, mayors, and local chief executives. For instance, it has actively worked with the League of Organic Agriculture Municipalities and Cities. These partnerships have enabled them to install local ordinances that promote the practice of organic farming and the prohibition of the use of chemical agricultural inputs in some towns and cities, as well as the prohibition of the entry of GMOs like the golden rice. One of the major wins of these multi-sectoral partnerships of all advocates and stakeholders of agroecology in the Philippines, including Masipag, is the passing of the Republic Act 168, or the Organic Agriculture Law in the Philippines, enacted in 2010. In 2020, through the continued advocacy of Masipag and other advocates of agroecology, the Organic Agriculture Law was amended so that the central role of small-scale farmers and indigenous people in agroecology is recognized. Amendments in this law have also led to the inclusion of the participatory guarantee system. In July 2021, networks of civil society organizations and NGOs, including Masipag, had the online People's Review of the SDG implementation in the Philippines. Masipag helped in facilitating the fora wherein farmers, fisherfolks, indigenous peoples, women reviewed the Philippine government's efforts to implement the SDG 2, 3, 12, and 13. And in September 2021, Masipag was one of the key actors also in organizing the Global People's Summit on Food System, a global parallel activity to the UN Food System Summit, which was organized by grassroots organizations, NGOs, CSOs, and advocates of people-led, sustainable, just food systems. Masipag also partners with schools and universities, and this is where I will share how our department, the Department of Community Development of the University of the Philippines, has been working with Masipag in order to help the small farmers organizations build their capacities in promoting agroecology. So our university, the University of the Philippines charter is really honor and excellence in the service of the people. So we really develop our students and our faculties to be public servants, in the service of the nation. So our community engaged teaching and research and extension work is really the core of our practice as scholars, as faculty members, and as practitioners of community development. So we are guided by praxis or learning from theory and practice, guided by combining learning and service to the communities, and building lifelong partnerships and social solidarity. So as I said, our background is not really agriculture, but it's more community development. Our undergraduate and graduate programs in community development focuses on being able to help with grassroots communities and basic sectors in building their capacities in community organizing, community education, and community resource management. So it's really, we are trying to be in solidarity and support of the efforts of grassroots communities and basic sectors in empowering themselves and being active actors in the development process. The heart and soul of our undergrad and graduate program is our field work, where faculty and students live in communities of farmers, fisher folks, indigenous peoples, and the urban poor, as we believe that community integration and immersion is the most potent means for consciousness raising, grounded theorizing, and social solidarity building between students and sectors and communities. This slide shows my fieldwork team in 2019, right before the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, where students engaged in farming activities, in the reproductive and the domestic work of women. By living and working and learning with the farmers, the students get to feel, experience firsthand the situation of farmers and engage in their collective efforts to practice and promote agroecology. We have helped Masipag in their efforts to build the capacity of farmers in organizing, in organizational development, in community education, in participatory program implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and advocacy work. This slide again shows our team. We conducted a workshop on organizational development here, along with farmer leaders for various farmers organizations in Southern Luzon. Yesterday, our speaker underscored the importance not only of the content, but the process by which we enable and empower smallholder farmers to learn. And I would like to say that our engagement with farmers really focuses on participatory learning processes. This year, our fieldwork team conducted a research on the good practices of farmers on agroecology. So we conducted a bit online because it was we couldn't go to the fields because of social distancing and health protocols. So we conducted online focus group discussions of 6 local organizations, 2 NGOs, farmer scientists, and a partner scientist. By the end of the semester, the fieldwork team was able to write inspiring stories on the farmers' practice of bayanihan. Bayanihan is a local indigenous labor exchange practice and self-help practice. Which they use for them to be able to collectively manage their communal farms, their communal gardens, their communal trial farms, and all these enable them to share food and seeds to hungry and rural and urban poor communities during the pandemic. We were able to come up with stories of organized farmers that continued to mobilize to protect their rights, especially of farmers who were struggling to claim their land, their ancestral domain, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Farmers continued to protest against the rice liberalization law because, the easy entry of imported rice was really hurting the local produce of the local farmers. We were able to come up with stories of organized farmers who played key roles in advocating policies for better public health, farmer-led agroecology, people-led just health and equitable sustainable food systems, and stories about rural women who played key roles in sustaining vegetable gardens, herbal gardens, feeding programs, community health programs, and other care work for their families and communities during the pandemic. Okay, so these were some of the other fieldwork activities that our classes, our students conducted. No, so we were able to support Masipag in their various social media advocacies and fundraising campaigns, because late last year, 2020, there was a series of typhoons that affected the farmers. So our students also participated in the fundraising. Just a few weeks ago, my fieldwork team, along with farmers leaders, also organized 2 training workshops. The first was a training workshop on community-based participatory action research on the impact of glyphosate on farmers and women, and their efforts to promote agroecology as an alternative to chemical-based farming. This research is important. Actually, it was started already by Masipag last year. There is already an initial result of the research, but our team is helping also Masipag build the capacities of local farmers organizations to continue the research on the impact of glyphosate. This is important because initial studies of Masipag show that areas using glyphosate has caused the death of farm animals, has contaminated soil and water that may be related to the unexplained illnesses, and in some cases, the sudden death of farmers. Another training that we conducted along with farmer leaders was a training on farmer-led local advocacy, lobbying, and networking. Through these trainings, we hope to be able to help the Masipag farmers to continue their local campaigns on the adverse impact of glyphosate and other agrochemicals, as well as in promoting the alternative, the practice of agroecology and sustainable, just, equitable, healthy, and appropriate food systems. I would like to note that we were able to develop the training modules of these 2 trainings through a participatory approach. So the farmers really participated in developing the modules, and we hope to be able to finalize this also through the help of the small farmers of Masipag. As part of our ongoing efforts to document and share the good practices of Masipag to other university schools and other stakeholders, I also did a mini research on how this farmer-led network creatively responded to the pandemic and contributed to the social solidarity that emerged during the pandemic. Entitled Seeds of Hope in the Midst of the Health and Food Crisis, the Masipag's response and contribution to social solidarity building during the pandemic. And these are some of the highlights of the research. First, we saw that the small farmers' agroecological practices enable them to help feed poor communities and sectors during the pandemic. Second, the importance of recognizing and valuing the centrality of women's reproductive work and care work in the private and public spheres in social and economic development, and the nexus between women's reproductive work, food production, and environmental protection. And finally, the importance of recognizing and supporting farmers' critical role in building multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder social solidarity that asserts sustainable development models such as agroecology and farmer-led, sustainable, just, and equitable healthy food systems. Okay, that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. We will have another communication before the discussion. So the next presentation is on organization experience in supporting rural transformation, agroecology mainstreaming, and family farmers with a view to building back greener and more resilient. So this will be presented by Toan Ho. She is a training expert at the North Vietnam College of Agriculture and Rural Development.
Yes. Hello, Pierre. Hello, everyone. Can I share the screen?
Yes, go ahead.
So can you see the screen?
Yes.
Now you can see. So hello, everyone. On behalf to And VCAC, VNFU, Vietnam Farmer Union, the North Vietnam College of Agriculture and Rural Development, and Vietnam Forestry University in Vietnam. I would like to present a topic insights into supporting Vietnamese family farmers, cooperatives, and food system transformation through sustainable forest product-based enterprise approach and diversity. Firstly, let I introduce about the context in Vietnam. Vietnam is still an agricultural country, and with 89% of households are smallholder farmers. The average size of a smallholder is 0.32 hectares, and small farms are often rendered less efficient by the fragmented nature of their land holdings. And especially in the north of Vietnam, where most of the poorest ethnic minority living monocultural cultivation without protection measures had led to soil degradation, reducing crop yields and increasing investment costs in crop production. For instance, when we work with farmers who almost small family farms spend almost 40% of their value of production for agricultural inputs. Moreover, the area of land use for the majority of households is narrow due to the natural population increase. The deforestation to expand the conservation area is increasingly, and it leads to strongly impact to local living environment. Excuse me, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Most farmers have not received training in production, but only practice production according to the experience of generation in their families. Therefore, access to agroecology and improvement of farming methods to see production practice in the context of climate change is limited. Particularly out of total 21 million agriculture workers, corresponding to about 10 million households, about 97% of laborers are not trained in occupation. Only about 1.5% of the agricultural laborers have trained at the elementary level of agriculture. There are so many gaps in training rural human resources, including training content, training methods, the connection and harmonization of policies, and the application and replication of initiatives in the fields of agriculture, forestry, and there are still big gap in the capacity of agriculture cooperatives from an early stage to mature state and stand firm. And with the support of the Forest and Farm Facility FFF, FAO, and the Vietnam Farmers Union, partners from agriculture colleges, agriculture universities, as well as the research institute, the farmers will sell away of their situation, and then together they promote the community's internal resources and connect with external resources to develop production and business based on 5 groups of sustainable factors. Can I show a proof on models of FFF? Is the Vietnam Cinnamon and Style Nuts Cooperative in Dao Thịnh, Trấn Yên, and Yên Bái province. And is one of some models that has gradually overcome difficulties and is now widely recognized for its remarkable achievement. An approach for established sustainable forest product-based enterprise has strengthened the resilience of local farmers through a structured process of market analysis and development built initially around the cinnamon value chain. They have then started to diversify products and add value to products within their core value chain. They have also started to diversify into additional and alternative value chains with organic farming to gain further resilience. Everyone can see the process of cooperative development can be systemized into 7 key steps. As below, step 1, farmer recognize benefits of cooperative in the face of increasing internal risks. And step 2, community, they need to engagement community. And step 3, they identify a production vision and SWOT analysis leading to the formation of producer group, then an interconnected group, and then finally a cooperative. Step 4, business incubation to build staff capability within business organizations. And step 5, production and business planning in core value chain. And step 6, they diversification into new value chains and markets. And step 7, the implementation of further product pilots, evaluation, lesson learned, and replication. And here is a state of the Vietnam cinnamon and standard cooperative development before 2015 and after that, and until now. With the starting point, they only 4 small farmer group growing cinnamon with 3 to 11 households per group. They only sell raw cinnamon products to meet demand with low price, depending on traders like market information, technology, policy information, broadcast to the forest. And they don't know how to solve this problem with many effect of climate change risks. And after that, with the component of FFF, with farmer organization, they connect and building initial trust, and they form official cinnamon growing. And after that, they establish cooperative with core investment from Vietnam Summit exporting company, a private sector, which later become a member of the cooperative. And now they contribute inter-member and possibly considerable loan from banks. They build a factory and they grow. And now they grow 1,000 hectares of organic cinnamon. And they also diversified products from cinnamon, 19 kinds of products, export to more than 50 countries. And they also diversification into other value chains such as holy mulberry, medical plants or silk in their forest landscapes. They create small lot of jobs for other farmers in their region. And next, you can see the statistics of climate change and pandemic risk with their forest, with so many risks of climate change, and they don't know how to solve them. Yes, you can see. Yeah. And this is the picture compare before and after now. Cinnamon processing facility of one family in the group in 1950 before supporting, and with very rudimentary tools compared to now. They build the cooperative and they establish cooperative and they invest factory. Yeah, and you can see with some information now they get big achievement. And you can see the fingers here. Yes, and the lesson learned from the initiatives can contribute to supporting rural transformation, integrating agronomy and family farmer organizations. Firstly, we think the key word is diversity. Diversity in this model, we conduct diversity in the on the natural resources. A farmer practice organic farming, agroforestry, diversification of product under the forest canopy. And the second is the diversification on business product. They establish cooperative groups and they raise their voice with the authorities. They also make their power bigger, and they also diversification main products, chain development, and they also diversify the diversity of product chains. And third, the diversity by physical infrastructure and technology. They improve agricultural skill, infrastructure developments. Farmers work together and to make the road to road go to the forest. This help they reduce the cost, input cost, and they also invest in and upgrade machinery and technology. And for diversification on social network, the building linkage with cooperative groups, cooperatives. For instance, in this case, they work with 500 associated farmers, and they also building relationship with the community, governments, program, and partner to find the support and resources, and also broadcast the name, and you can see farmer diversity product and diversification. They practice organic farming, take so many advantage of local resources through our understand of the working principle of energy circle and the relationship between others of ecosystem. So it means brings so many benefits to help them get more get more solution for tool to handle with the climate change and more resilient with climate change. They also organic farming will help them increase soil and water holding capacity, and also increase the number of livelihood options such as growing mulberry, raising seafood, beekeeping, and so on, to diversify product and the forest canopy. Here you see. And the second learn from this model is an approach for establishing sustainable forest product-based enterprise has strengthened the resilience of local farmers through a structured process of market analysis and development build initiation around the cinnamon value chain. And you can see market analysis development M&D is the framework with 5 groups sustainable. When farmers decide or work together, they use the screening of the 5 areas of enterprise development to design activity and also find solutions for their problem. Here you can see the 4 M&D phase. And farmer group cooperative think like the potential entrepreneur, and they should think of the solution to the following worst case scenario based on 5 groups of sustainable factors. Firstly, about market economy, including financial aspect. And second, natural resources management environment. And third, social culture and institution level and technology technique. And all of solution, farmers need to recognize their problem and unique voluntary to solve their problem together. They think together based on gather information and coaching, supporting from facilitators, integrate management based on their forest landscape roundtable and policy advocacy, and they find solution for their problem to get achievement. And the third lesson is the access to product certification needs to be flexible. PGS, such as PGS certification, it's important to make sure it wins, to do it right, and to have farmers adhere to good agricultural practice. The cooperative has access to PGS certification. This is a participation warranty system for organic products. This PCS certification of Vietnam has been recognized by IFOM and has been applied in Vietnam for more than 10 years. However, this certificate has not been recognized fully by the government, but is encouraged to use. However, due to a good monitoring and a cross-checking system, the PCS system has been a great help in assisting farmers in complying with practice according to international certification. Second, PCS certification with cost is suitable for small-scale farmers and sustainable with local market. So farmers will have better access. And fourth lesson learned is the method of capacity building. From the training need the farmers, their capacity needs to be enhanced with a learner-centric approach, learning through the experiential circle and focusing on all the learners with different ethnic backgrounds. Because in the Vietnam, they are so diversified ethnic minority, so we had to focus on this issue. And technical training to pay attention to youth farmer field school, FFS methodology, and peer-to-peer learning. As the follow-up step, there needs to be an organization representing farmers strong enough to connect the cooperation of the parties, train core farmers to be farmer trainers, and they instruct to other farmers. And after that, there is a very important thing is a coaching activity. Coaching activity follow-ups are very important in capacity building method. Farmers are given the opportunity to carry out their production and business activities, and they have trainers to coach them, motivate, facilitate them to discuss their own problems and find solutions to their problems. And in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, online training follows the group tutoring method, and so the training process for group cooperatives and market connection is not broken. Lack of teaching staff expert about organized farming or sustainable agriculture is also a problem. Many extension workers do not understand organic organization and ecological agriculture. So they lack ability to help the farmer. That's they are in charge. So in this program, local extension workers were invited to participate, and then this team consult provincial officials and contribute to the content of the agriculture development project of Sơn La, Hòa Bình, and Hòa Bình province. It also necessary to bring the content of ecological agriculture, sustainable agriculture into training in agriculture for vocational colleagues. Training should be organized according to the actual needs of farmer organizations, such as VNFU and farmers cooperatives. With such really useful lesson learned in the process of supporting a number of cooperative groups, but in order to put them into professional training program at college or vocational college or university about agriculture to train for students, for farmers is not easy. Thus come to each of the different views of college, leader of college and universities. There are still big gaps in the replication of methods and models of vocational training in sustainable agriculture, organic agriculture, business development methods of enterprise, cooperatives, cooperative groups based on sustainable resources management. Therefore, we come here with the desire to learn from experts and see solutions to replicate the lesson learned in rural areas, such as organic farming methods, cooperative development, approach for establishing sustainable forest products by enterprise. Thank you very much, and good thing for all of you. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this very interesting experience from Vietnam. Now we'll have Dr. Petri Sorencio from SIACA as a discussant. So Ped, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Pierre. Again, thank you very much to our speakers for sharing their on-the-ground experiences, in implementing these programs that add up to the mounting body of evidences indicating that agroecology can lead to social and environmental transformations. As we all know, agroecology is principle-based, and these principles have served as guideposts for countries in transforming their agri-food system. And of course, it is used to mainstream sustainable agriculture on large scale and achieving multiple SDGs, starting with zero hunger. However, not only the principle-based approach to agroecology was highlighted in the presentations, but also the important properties and elements that have facilitated the operationalization of agroecology in the two countries. But before discussing them, maybe we should note that this took off from pressing concerns regarding the sustainability of the agri-food system, which may include the lack of knowledge, not only from the farmers level, but also from the consumers on the quality and quantity of locally grown agroecology products, the need to organize farmer groups and inform them about the standards and adherence to certification systems towards building this resilient community, starting with establishing that collective responsibility, sustaining the productivity levels despite shifts in climate and the degradation of natural environment that impact land and water, and the system for insurance of goods, which are important for developing resilient farming systems. The provision of technology and facilities, as well as agricultural enterprising to build and enhance the capacity of actors through enhancing education and information on localized production systems. The lack of support systems, particularly on technology for agricultural practices, which is also the reason maybe for low adoption rates from small-scale farming organizations. And of course, the lack of access to markets and premium price produced from the purview of policy development and the wastage and the need to use environmentally friendly distribution systems. So, but despite these concerns, there were very definitive capacity development practices that underscored the multi-stakeholder collaboration in the two countries through the application of participatory methods that were implemented alongside environmentally friendly approaches and the adoption of specific technologies to deliver synergistic benefits and outputs at the various scales. Interestingly, while they were both talking about the outcomes of their interventions, they were also describing the processes that help achieve their institutional objectives. Like for instance, for the Department of Community Development of UP Diliman, it is about engaging communities in learning and building that lifelong partnership with Masipag and establishing that social solidarity through the application of both practical and theoretical knowledge. NVCARD, on the other hand, as an agricultural college, extends support to the government by executing its important mission of training workers in rural areas on sustainable farming methods. In a nutshell, both institutions have capitalized on community partnerships and have highlighted the value of collaboration in their various forms and conditions towards the achievement of co-produced knowledge that can be used for designing and implementing sustainable and resilient food systems following the principle-based agricultural approaches. And this has led to empowered farmer organizations. We heard the importance of academic institutions and their roles in the process of reforming and initiating the transformative changes in the agri-food systems through research, extension, and capacity building. As described by our speakers, for this to grow, a considerable degree of recognizing the respective roles of these actor networks in the deliberation process was needed, wherein transdisciplinary methods were placed highly to support basically a consistent level of interaction that supported their advocacy. A case in point is the alignment of innovative adaptation towards agroecology by Masipag and UPDCD, wherein participatory action researches and farmer-led models were implemented to support farmers. Since by nature agroecology is both ecological and agricultural, or agronomic in particular, a predominant approach grounded on transdisciplinary and participatory should be advocated, and developing the capacity of stakeholders and providing that enabling environment for partnership and collaboration reverses the usual top-down participatory approach. And this goes beyond the linear framework of knowledge exchange. In the past, no decision-making processes failed to include the stakeholders, resulting in solving the wrong problems. No, so knowledge is an intellectual asset for organizations and communities that is found important for all actors in the communities where they are working. Participation, on the other hand, is a behavioral change that is nestled in knowledge systems and factors that include knowledge co-creation and co-production strategies, facilitation of mutual learning, and development of these information sharing tools that leverage the right technologies. So as such, engaging in decision making could uncover the diversity of thoughts, actions, and built-in capacities. Both farmer organizations and the academe have benefited from the transdisciplinarity, which is really a key feature of sustainable development because of the process of knowledge co-production, wherein the objective is to facilitate the exchange necessary for decision making. This was particularly evident in Vietnam, wherein diversification, marketability, economic resilience, and empowered organizations were developed to support the transformation process. At this juncture, maybe I would like to share some salient points that the academic institutions working with communities and farmer organizations could consider in promoting this further the agroecological practices. First, we have to note that local people's empowerment is crucial to successful agri-food transformation towards inclusive and sustainable development. A general experience from the countries, including those in the region, have shown the transformative impacts of empowering local people on developing adaptive and localized systems, resulting in substantial natural, social, and financial capital formation, which led to a series of benefits and financial gains, including improvements in livelihood and food security. So economic, environmental, and political benefits were generated where individuals and organizations and communities are coherent and exercise control over their adapted systems. Some have contributed to climate change mitigation or adaptive capacity enhancements, while some situations led to improved livelihood outcomes. Similarly, in Vietnam, particularly where grassroots democracy has followed. So second, there's a need to specifically target the poorest and the most vulnerable. And as exemplified by our speaker from the Philippines, improving the livelihoods of the general community does not necessarily translate to alleviation of poverty, which requires the poor to be identified and benefits are specifically targeted towards them. So for instance, in the Philippines, unless specific measures to empower the poorest and the most vulnerable are designed into development interventions, benefits from community efforts will be captured and appropriated by only the powerful segments within these communities. So that's the limitation. And there's the need to invest in building local institutions, including the smallholder producers organizations, and successful transformative changes are most likely effective when local institutions exist and when local people play a meaningful role in developing these institutions. So investing in development and strengthening of networks and organizations, such as in the case of the two countries, particularly in Vietnam, where the small-scale forest and farm producers provides the strategic and practical means of scaling up and ensuring the inclusion of small producers and enterprises and making up maybe the majority of the forest and farm producers later on. Strong organized groups enable them to represent their interests, and they can negotiate for more favorable terms and increase their opportunities to share in the benefits of sustainable development. So another point that I would like to impart is the need to foster enabling regulatory frameworks and the conditions for transformative change. These lessons from the community engagements by the two institutions highlight very important critical factors for success. First is security of land rights and tenure over land and natural resources. No, the balance between the incentives and the benefits and the responsibilities. No, particularly cost. The strong, transparent, and accountable governance at different levels. The access to enhancing technical skills and knowledge, and the knowledge of markets and access to markets for goods and services, which are particularly highlighted in Vietnam's case. And of course, the bureaucratic mandate and culture that support communities and smallholders to implement the agri-food system interventions such as the certification systems. No? Finally, there's the need to facilitate an integrated cross-sectoral polycentric approach to support the platforms for cross-sectoral dialogue and coordination at different levels. Both fragmented, sectorally focused, conceptual regulatory frameworks and policies pose barriers to holistic, integrated, and innovative approaches that are necessary for promoting effective agricultural or agroecological practices such as organic farming that embrace natural resource management and sustainable development. So there's a need to adopt broader paradigms and operating frameworks that enable sharing of knowledge, initiating the mutual learning, and jointly addressing cross-cutting concerns such as climate change, and ensuring inclusion and equity among social groups at different levels. Given the enormity and urgency of the challenges confronting the countries individually and collectively, it is especially important to support the development of operationalization of cross-sectoral platforms for policy dialogue, facilitating deep listening and quick learning within countries in the region. Further from these points, we can observe that because of the interconnectivity of the different sectors, between and among the three sustainability dimensions, the economy, the environment, and the society, I think agricultural or ecological practices should be able to manage certain potential trade-offs. So for instance, between the environment and society, the potential concern arise on biodiversity loss due to society-induced land use changes. Between economy and society, there's the challenges for stable and equitable supply, marketing, processing, and retailing of diversity, nutrient-rich food. And between economy and environment, the triggers actually falls between the bounds of manufacturing and production that may affect environmental depletion and degradation. But now, as we look further at the reforms, they can actually be the source of solutions, wherein academic institutions should support by coordinating and providing legal prescriptions, integrated planning, evaluating the trade-offs through an assessment of ecosystem services to make interdependence and trade-offs explicit in creating that narrative for building a community of practice. So the flexibility to coordinate with boundary organizations and undertaking broad and inclusive deliberation are essential in this process, and to be able to foresee development, maybe through scenario planning, for instance. Finally, the road to transformative change requires effective links between informal settings and the formal policy processes, wherein these polycentric structures with flexible mechanisms and coordination play a significant role. The academic institutions should determine internally the presence and absence of specific knowledge and skills that could be a reference as to what type of capacity building activities are needed to support participation. Empowering farmers by training them to communicate, to articulate and confidently speak in public will help them better air and petition for their needs and connect with relevant agencies. External to these organizations, however, the type of governance, the presence of legal frameworks and functional legal bodies, and the commitment of the higher ups, the adoption of the bottom-up approach, and the existence of development programs or projects to facilitate the innovation, which are also key considerations. Governance reflects the centrality of equity in achieving just and sustainable outcomes. So highlighting the need to link this to a fair share among stakeholders and the socioeconomic benefits derived from the interventions. But above all, it is the continuity of these promising interventions that matter, no? Because change takes years or decades to happen. If reforms did not happen yesterday, the best time to execute change is now. So again, thank you very much to our speakers for sharing the experiences and for continuing this daunting task of supporting our smallholder farmers and following the concept, no, of diffusion as an institution. You have created this stimuli to spread the idea of agriculture innovation from its heart to other areas for an imaginable emulation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ped, for your commentary. I mean, that was really great. I would like to ask our two speakers if you would like to react to what Dr. Ped just mentioned.
Yes, may I say something,
Yes.
Pierre? Thank you very much, Dr. Rencho, for your comments. But I would like to link also my presentation and reiterate what Dr. Peter of Equisur also mentioned earlier, that the first really at the core of the strength of our efforts to promote agroecology is the strength of our small farmers organizations, our rural women's organizations. So we are really advocating for a farmer-led, people-led agroecology. But I think it has to be said also that we cannot really dream to promote agroecology if we do not address also the big issues, no? The corporate control of our seeds, the corporate control of agricultural inputs, the monopoly of agrochemicals. And so, yeah, maybe this is an opportunity also for me to maybe advocate for UNFAO to rethink, no, partnering with CropLife, a big pesticide company, because we know for a fact that agrochemicals have been hurting our environment, have had impact on our health. No, as I said, we are doing intensifying our research on the impact of glyphosate and other agrochemicals, and I think Marie-Aude was sending a message to me that she would like for us to talk about these things. No? So I think not just organizing small farmers organizations and grassroots organizations and all the marginalized and poor communities, who in the Philippines are majority of our population, but really, I think the question of scaling up agroecology is linked to this, the task of scaling up the social movements that Dr. Peter mentioned a while ago, the social movements that will challenge, corporate control of our farms, of our agricultural inputs, and really push forth for people-led, farmer-led, sustainable, just, healthy food systems. And at the heart of this is farmer-led agroecological systems. Thank you, po.
Thank you very much. Toan Ho, you want to add anything? To react?
Yes, actually, our group here with Yvonne from Vietnam Farmer Union and Dr. Phạm Thanh Hải, yes, the headmaster of NVCAP. And so can I invite them because yes, this
they are not as a panelist, so
yes.
we can't. I mean, we may not have time to bring them on board to speak live. So if you want to react to what has been said, you can react. Otherwise, we'll have to move to the next communication because we have a tight schedule.
Okay, so I think the short time. So yeah, so, thank you, yeah.
Okay, now because we have to finish the session today at 4:30 because after we all go into the plenary session for the final part of the day. So if you don't have any reaction, I would suggest that we move to the next communication. So that's at the end, potentially we still have a little bit of time and I can take some question. In the meantime, if among the participants you have question, please type your question in the Q&A box or in the chat box so that they can be addressed later on. So now we are going to move to the last two presentations of this afternoon. So the next one is on bridging the gap between formal and informal seed systems through community seed bank in Asia. And this will be presented by Patrick Trail, who is a research and extension coordinator at the Eco Asia Impact Center in Chiang Mai in Thailand. So Patrick, you have 15 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, let's get my slides here. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes. Thank you for your introduction, Pierre. And I'm glad to be here today. I'm working with Eco Asia, coming to you today from Thailand. We're based in Chiang Mai. And our organization works with a network of development workers all over the world, about 20,000 net workers and development workers doing agricultural development and practitioners. So today, I'm happy to be here in a room full of fellow agroecologists, so I don't have to convince anyone that that's a good idea, but we can be in a like-minded room and bounce ideas off of each other, which is a wonderful thing. So today, I'm going to talk about seeds, and this is an area that our organization has spent a lot of time working in. And I know agroecology is a huge, huge topic, and there's many facets of that. And our organization we're a smaller NGO and a humble NGO, and so we don't have much expertise compared to many of you in the room, but this is a piece that we have done quite a bit of work in, quite a bit of research and work on the ground throughout Southeast Asia with several different partners in several different countries. So I'm just going to walk through some areas that we've been working with seed banks. So I just want to quickly point out that there are different seed systems, and some of us have already touched on this today. And we all know we have the formal seed system with large-scale gene banks and plant breeders, crop breeders, putting out varieties that are sold through seed companies, and those are often hybrids or commercial cash crops, corn, soybean, things like this. But then we also know that there is a local seed system, and that is what's been around for generations and generations, and many people work, and many smallholder farmers work in this realm where seeds are traded, seeds are saved on farm, traded locally through local seed vendors and local seed exchanges. And often these are open pollinated seeds, and often locally adapted seeds, varieties that have been present for generations are indigenous seeds. And so this is kind of the realm that we're working in, this quote informal seed system or local seed system. And so we've been working with a network of community seed banks, and there are many community seed banks throughout this region. This is certainly not all of them, but these are some of the ones in our partner organization. And we've been working over the years to provide some technical assistance through research of low-cost, appropriate seed storage methods and seed storage infrastructure, and even getting into some of the organizational challenges of operating a small-scale seed bank or a community seed bank. And we work to train seed bank managers. We have the opportunity to bring seed bank manager interns to our office in Chiang Mai, to our Small Farm Resource Center, and our regional seed bank here. We can offer up some just very practical assistance and guidance. So when I talk about a community seed bank, it may not be what many people have in mind. They're very small. These are very informal systems. Some might say primitive institutions or low scale. They're not high level institutions. These are community based, and sometimes they're as small as one earth bag house or a rammed earth storage facility with no electricity. And seeds are stored sometimes with no cold rooms, but appropriate technologies such as low cost vacuum sealing and desiccants like zeolite drying beads and other things like this. So these are very remote areas. So we're working in places that often don't have access to the larger gene banks that are in some of the larger systems that we know well. So we work with low-cost technologies. You can see here just very simple technologies for drying seeds. In places where seed moisture meters are not available, and drying chambers, germination chambers, things like this that we have in other seed banks are often not present. So we can see here a solar-powered germination cabinet or solar dryer, and we've been working on all sides of running these institutions, from the field production to the seed drying to the seed storage, to the inventory management of seeds in a small system where maybe even a computer is not available. Maybe it's done on a phone, a cell phone, or even on paper. So when I say informal system, in this case, these community seed banks that we're working with, they're, like I said, engaged with the local markets, local seed traders, and often self-pollinated seed, open pollinated seeds. These are typically not seed companies. They operate more like gene banks, where when the seeds are distributed, because they're open pollinated, they can be saved year after year, which does eliminate the need to come back year after year. So something like a mix between a seed bank and a gene bank. So a few years ago, just 2 years ago in 2019, we had the opportunity to host what we called the Regional Community Seed Bank Managers Forum. And this was the first for us and that I know of in the region. And we had the privilege of hosting 22 seed bank managers, community seed bank managers from all over Southeast Asia and South Asia. And we came together and had the opportunity to do some professional development, as well as brainstorming and doing some needs assessment. What are the needs of these institutions across the region? So we, before managers arrived on site, we sent out surveys, and we did some needs assessment of different areas of seed bank operations, from the infrastructure side, some of the needs there and challenges, to the technology side of storage, as well as the organizational structure of running, managing, and funding or financing these institutions. So we had a really good opportunity to kind of come together and brainstorm these things, and the wisdom in the room was amazing, and we learned of some of the challenges that exist, and ways that we can go forward in supporting this growing network of seed banks. And I bring this today, hopefully for the support of FAO and other organizations to recognize the importance of these small and often unrecognized institutions. So the survey yielded some great information. I really wish we had more time to get into it today, but we don't have that much time. But we learned that these small seed banks are very, very diverse in the seeds that they store and collect. Small organizations can store up to several hundred seed varieties, hundreds of species. They're using very low cost storage technologies, things like storage in plastic bottles and old beer bottles and in the refrigerator. We learned that there's much room for growth in this area and for additional technology. And there was a wide diversity of how these institutions fund themselves. Often they were connected to a local organization, grassroots organizations, sometimes church associations or other agricultural co-ops. Sometimes they were run by volunteers, and sometimes they had full-time staff funded and salaried. A very wide diversity of operations, but what was common was the diversity of seeds that they are sharing, and going beyond the typical larger cash crops, what we call neglected and underutilized crops. One of the pieces that we got to do is we got to have a SWOT analysis at the end, and we we broke up into different groups and we looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of running these institutions, and had some amazing lessons came out of this. And I think just some highlights real quick. One of the strengths was that these seed banks exist as extension hubs. So we learned that these seed banks do not just offer seeds, but they offer training and other agroecological practices, mulching, composting, SRI, many things like this, and operate somewhat like farmer field schools in a lot of cases. We learned that the many farmers, smallholder farmers wishing to get into the organic supply chain, one of the key pieces there is finding organic seed, and these seed banks were offering that locally, which was new. One of the weaknesses, across the board, there's no small-scale inventory tracking system. That was something that we picked up on really quickly, and there's a room for growth there. And then, as we've seen 2 years later, post-COVID, is that these institutions really helped with resiliency of communities, and they were there when other institutions could not be during COVID, or I think other disasters like floods, when supply chains break down, they're there and they're embedded in the communities. So that's been a lesson we've learned from them. So just quickly, how does this relate to agroecology? Obviously, that's what we're talking about today. And I wish I could go more into this, but obviously crop biodiversity, obviously the genetic material coming out of these seed banks is key for the greater agroecological transition. Starts with the seed, as we know. One thing we found was that by having seeds at these seed banks, it gave farmers crop rotation options. So in many cases, these are farmers that were still saving their own seed, and they're saving seed from harvest to planting, typically 9 months and nothing more. And so when farmers are doing that, we found that crop rotation or diversification of farming practices is difficult, because if a seed is not planted, it is lost. And so by having some stored in the seed banks, it opened up the options that they had for things like cover crops and mixing in different species instead of rice on rice on rice, for example. And then I mentioned the resiliency during the pandemic or other disasters. And then just quickly wanted to touch on the 10 elements of agroecology from FAO. And I think what we found here is there's a key piece here is obviously the diversity, and that in ecological practices starts with the seed. And so that's obviously a key piece. But what we also, what I think is really key to these is the resilience of smallholder communities, and especially remote communities that are maybe not tapped into what we call the formal system. So I would still label these institutions as informal, but as I titled this slideshow, it's bridging the gap between informal and formal. So I think these small community seed banks are very much informal systems, but they're formally organized through thinking through things like inventory management, thinking through long-term operations and how to keep genetic materials, crop biodiversity preservation, things like this. And then, yeah, we saw synergies with the local communities and sharing of knowledge. One of the really exciting things for me has been seeing how much extension happens through these community seed banks. I've had the privilege of being able to visit many of them, and agricultural training, extension, and consultation was happening almost every day on these sites while they're growing out seeds for saving. So that's just a very quick snapshot of what we're doing. I know we're limited on time. I wish we had more time to talk about this, but I just wanted to introduce this topic. I know some of you are already working in this realm, but for others it might be new. And we found this to be a really powerful piece of the broader agroecological transition that we all are striving for. So yeah, just wanted to wrap up by saying, if you ever find yourself in Chiang Mai, please come visit us. We have a great regional seed bank here of neglected and underutilized species and a small farm resource center. And please visit us on ecocommunity.org if you'd like to tap into a network of development workers all over the world working with smallholder farmers. It's a great resource. It's about 20,000 people currently, and just a great benefit of being able to connect with those people and ask questions and float out ideas of what's working, what's not working in practices like SRI, cover crops, conservation agriculture, many other things we've all been talking about today. So that's all for now, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for your presentation. Maybe one of the very big contribution also of the informal seed system is toward food and cultural tradition, because this is also where all it comes from. I mean, it's very important for local communities. Now we are going to move to the second presentation of this last part of our afternoon. This will be the name of the presentation is Advancing Way Forward to Transparent, Responsible and Sustainable Food System Transition through Building Agroecology Pathway. And it will provide insight into research-based development from a Vietnamese Academy of Agricultural Science-led partnership. So this presentation will be conducted by Pham Thi Han Tho she is an agricultural economist at the Center for Agrarian System Research and Development, CASRAD, in Vietnam. So the floor is yours and you have 15 minutes. You are muted. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. So,
go ahead.
Good afternoon, Pierre. Thank you very much to give me the chance to share some information that our team contributed. So our team is from the Agroecology and Safe Food System Transition project funded by EU and other partners. And our teams are the members from CIRAD, IPSAT, CASRAD, VAS, Vietnam's National Animals Institute, and other partners. So in our project, VAT is the leading organization, and I'm going to share with you. Sorry, I don't know. I'm going to share with you the information about the problems that. Sorry, can you see? Sorry, can you see
yes,
my presentation properly?
Yes.
Yeah. So firstly, I'd like to talk about the problems that occurs in our food system. So in the left-hand side, on the left-hand side, you can see the problems that may be linked to each other. They are soil erosions, and we face the difficulties of unsafe food. And our agriculture is now developing in the direction that we simplify the agricultural system. And then we face a problem with environment pollution. So it leads to the biodiversity loss. And we face also the market access and also the equities of sellers and buyers. Sometimes the producers can produce quite good foods, but they could not access to the high-end market where they can get a higher income and from the higher price, so that they change the practice, but they still not changing the price and the income. So all the problems lead to we consider they are the unsustainable development way. So from the scholars and the practices, we can see agroecology is the pathway that we can develop and transfer the food system that now Vietnam and other countries, I believe, in developing world are now facing, that we can transfer the current situation into the more transparent, responsible, and sustainable food system. We have six emerging initiatives in agroecology. So we adapted the classification from the work that John Cristo Castella and his colleagues built in 2015. So similar to other countries in Mekong River, we have 6 types of agroecological system. We call firstly we call it agroforestry, and second we have an integrated crop management (IPM). We have also organic agriculture that we developed and apply for different safety certification like a JAS from Japan, USDA from the US, and especially nowadays Vietnam we have a TCVN that consider the national standard for organic products, and we also have a PGS that you have heard from the case that Ms. Tuan already presented. And of course, we have a practice in system of rice intensification 3, because in Vietnam we are now one of the leading exporters in the world, and we have a home garden VAC and conservation agriculture. What I want to share with you is that nowadays from the agroecological farming system, it's not only changed the way that we do the agriculture, but also the mindset that we know that the phenomenon that aging labor in the rural area, that we can see in Vietnam, in other countries, developing countries, we can see in the rural areas only elder persons now working on the field. However, it's now this change is a little bit changing, but it's good point that the young generation, when they go to the big city for education and they gain the knowledge and they change, they may be very successful in their career in the big city. However, they are now changing their minds and they can consider about the sustainable development as the must way to go, and also the opportunity for their livelihood and for the development of the community. So many young generations, they go back to the home country and they start up the business working on agroecology, and very successful cases have seen in Vietnam now. That they can build up the unique products and export the products, local product, special product to the very high end and promising market around the world. And in VAS now, from the VAS, we are now working in different activities and different. We have different groups with different disciplines. Firstly, we disseminate the methods of how to conduct the agroecological research and development work, and we have conducted a variety of training courses that we can disseminate the tool that funded by FAO, and we based on the 10 elements of agroecology built by FAO. And especially, we are not only providing the trainings costs for the researchers, but also the related stakeholders in the value chain. For example, we train the producers, the smallholders, and also the entrepreneurs, that firstly they can understand what agroecology is, and they change their mind and can apply, and after that they can apply in their farm, and by the end they can share the idea with the local leaders and build up the planning for the transition to agroecology. And we appreciated the participatory methods that we work with the value chain stakeholders and also the leaders of the locality to see whether the locality can push up the transition. Now I'm talking about the other works that VAS and other partners within VAS and ASAP team are now doing, that we enhance the value chain coordination solution for agroecological food systems. So you can see from the slide, we are the supporting stakeholders that consist of different organizations such as the donors like FAO, CIRAD, and also we have research institutions like VAS, CASRAT, NOMASI. And especially when we do the support, we really apply the participatory approach that we gather producer, traders, consumer, processors together, and we discuss with them and see the problem, the bottleneck, the value chains, and then we will find out and make the decision of the intervention together. That means we are not only coping the problem from production, but also consumption and along the chains. For example, with the producers, normally we have the interventions on the practice, and normally we will give support to them through the cooperatives or interest group or even cooperative alliance to improve their knowledge and their practices to ensure that they can bring the products according to the traders' demand and consumer demand. So that means our supports are in knowledge sharing and practices, and we build the relationship between the stakeholders so that we are not only change the system, the farming system, but we step by step changing the mindset of the whole value chain stakeholders, and then finally we can bring the good products into the good markets. So that in the slides you can see some information about the collective brands building that we have supported to different products. For example, for avocados in Sơn province of Vietnam, we have them to build up the intellectual property protection. They got the brand, and they also conduct the quality management in the farmer groups, and we build up the linkage, the market linkages to the certified products. So by the end of the day, the farmer could get their product with brand, with the information, with QR code, and sell to the potential market. However, we all know that the aim is the biodiversity protection is the global aims. However, it's related to different factors, and we understand that the sustainable development is consists of three elements that presented by the United Nations. They are equality, they are economy, and they are environment. So the issue that we want to share and we want to bring with you is that when we would like to transfer or we convert the farming system from the conventional to agroecological system, it's really important that we have to combine three benefits together, and we have to look at them together. Not solely one benefit. Normally for the policymaker or for the management organization, we focus on environment or equity. However, in our experience, we can see the stakeholders of value chain, they are mainly focused on economic benefits. And nowadays, the consumer knowledge is now changing. When they buy the products, they are not only looking at price, not looking at external view, external aspects, but also some of them may look at what the benefits of environment and what the benefit the community that the product can be in. And in the slide, I just want to put one initiative that invented by the United Nations International Conference, that they give the definitions and the concept of biotrade. And biotrade is a combination of biodiversity and trade. And this initiative was implemented by an NGO in Vietnam, Habitat. And if you want to see further information, you can click on biotrade in Vietnam, and you can see very successful cases that they can. And I believe that one of the cases are really related to the case that Ms. Tuan already presented is star anise in mountainous Siberia. They combine the organic certification and biotrade certification together, and they are now successful in the international market. And talking about the policy driver for changing into the sustainable transition, actually Vietnamese government now, they have a very good orientation and policy, policy set or document to guide the different levels to change the food system into more sustainable manner. And we can see that very clearly recently we have a party congress document state very clearly that the vision towards sustainable development on 3 pillars of agroecology, modern, rural, and smart farmers. And value chain upgrading protection and effectively exploitation of agricultural resources are the main focus that the government now focusing. So the take-home message that our team would like to share with you today. So we would like to go back to the 3 elements of sustainable development. Should be the appropriate strategies for different levels when we want to transfer the conventional farming system to agroecology. They are equity, they are equity, environment, and economy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this great presentation and to show all the multi-dimension intervention of VAS in Vietnam to promote agroecology. So now we have 16 minutes left before we have to join the plenary session. So I will hand over the floor to my colleague Abraham for his commentary over the last 2 communications. Abraham, over to you. Sorry, I forgot to introduce you, but he's agriculture officer, part of the agroecology team in headquarters. Sorry, over to you.
No problem, Pierre. Thank you, everybody, for this very enlivening and energizing session. It's good to see many familiar faces here. And I get the benefit of having seen all 6 of the presentations. And I want to save time for discussion. So I just have a few concluding or closing thoughts related to the last 2 talks, but also trying to weave a thread of the other 6 as well. So let me share some of these with you. My first one is that I think one of the things that we have seen throughout is this idea of transdisciplinary and networks. And I think this comes out very, very strongly as we look at agroecology. When we look at the wholeness of agroecology, I saw the 10 elements of agroecology used several times, which show entry points across the dimensions and the interconnectedness and the interrelatedness of these elements. And I think that's important to remember as we look at how ARIs can help to co-create. And I think really that's the takeaway, is this idea of co-creation. But in order to do that well, we need transdisciplinary participatory research networks. And we've seen examples of these networks. And the thing about networks is that they're organic, they're a little bit messy, but they're free from a lot of the bureaucratic administrative burdens that larger institutions have. And I think when we see these networks, we really have the opportunity to connect the push-pull dimensions of change so building on what Peter talked about. So I think that's an important thread that I've seen throughout. I think another important thing that we have seen in this discussion is that, yes, many ARIs are focusing on production, but they're not focusing on production alone. And really just a reminder that in order to elicit change, we are moving beyond production into the sustainability of the entire food system. And so in order to do that, we need holistic co-creation approaches that take into account all the dimensions of sustainability. We saw that beautifully in the last topic, where markets and access were a major component. But we also need integrated research, participatory research, co-creation on other dimensions as well that are maybe a bit harder for us who are strong in agronomy or environmental science, but on processing and on market access, on the socioeconomic components such as women and gender, youth in their employment, but also moving into policy and transdisciplinary work on things like land tenure and natural resource management as well. So keeping that in mind as we look at academic and research institutions, that the transdisciplinarity to make change is going to be absolutely essential. I heard the word complexity and systems approaches in a number of talks, and complexity is messy, but it's absolutely essential for helping to understand and to co-create in a contextually relevant way. Another thread that I saw is that really throughout we've seen examples of what Wetzel and some of his colleagues described as agroecology being a science, a practice, and a social movement. And I think that they've really been exemplified, and they find their home in co-creation networks of change. And there's tension there as well. As one of my fellow discussants mentioned, the absolute essentiality of seeing farmers as drivers of co-creation, as drivers of research and innovation, with the social movement aspect to it, but also with the practical and the practice level experience. We saw that with the talk on seed banks and community seed banks. And with that, we saw how farmer-driven and community seed banks can offer an important and often untapped potential to co-create with and support farmers and communities through research. Another important point is just the continued focus on co-creation within a very specific cultural and ecological context. And that's one of the hallmarks of agroecology is that it's contextually relevant. It's from the ground up. It is knowledge intensive, and it's farmer driven. It's people centered, not just farmers, but also the processors, the consumers, like we were reminded of in the last talk. I think moving just 2 more points more into the existential realm is, I think it's really important for us to remember, and we saw this throughout the 6 presentations, about the essentiality of local knowledge or local wisdom and the humble appreciation for that. And I think one thing that you've made clear and that I've seen in my own experiences is there is a humility that is required to co-create, to come alongside, to be asked to enter into and to support. And with that humility comes an understanding and an appreciation of multiple knowledge systems, the local knowledge, the wisdom knowledge, but also integrating that with science and the scientific method is important, and that requires humility. One last, I think, rumination is just, the idea of, and necessity really, of strengthening, of supporting, of coming alongside local institutions, and helping them to succeed. But I think it's also important, and as part of FAO, to see the linkage between a scaling out, bottoms up approach and the absolute essential need as well for policy that can enable a scaling up of this, and research and academia is essential. And I think where the beauty happens is in that messy middle between the policy and the enabling environment and the local experiences, the local wisdom, co-creating together, moving outward but also upward. And I think that's the exciting realm in which we find ourselves in agroecology. And so thank you very much, Pierre. I want to turn it over for questions and discussions.
Thank you very much, Abraham. So I don't know if our two last speakers want to react already to what Abraham just mentioned.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abraham and Pierre. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you very much. And I can hear from your comments and from your conclusion that they're clearly that we really need the network that combine different partners in the way to changes to convert the conventional food system into more sustainable. So we can say that in Vietnam now we are somehow successful in advocacy the government, that we already have a really good orientation and in the government document. However, we face the challenges in bring it into practice and to apply the methods. For example, we got really good methods from FAO that can bring up the tool, can use the tool to evaluate the agroecologies in the field. However, we really need to scale up and make it as the tool applied by different local partners. We really need to disseminate the method, because in Vietnam and in different regions, in different value chains, we have a different perspective and different characteristics. We really need to apply and see whether it fits to different and specific circumstances. That the thing that we would like. And just want to share the last point, that after the how to say, the dissemination activity that VAS have done with different partners about the tool, we already formed the informal network that combine researchers and entrepreneurs and farmers together, which we continue to share the knowledge. And they really want, and one very emerging demand is that they really want to build up a brand of some kind of a agroecological brand that legally register under our law and our current situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you really touch upon something very important, and one of the biggest challenge of agroecology is that to date there is no way to certify agroecology. So if we can't certify, unfortunately we cannot deliver premium, and premium is one of the incentive for farmers to actually engage fully in the transition. So this is really something that is critical and needs to be thought through more. Patrick, do you want to comment as well?
Sure, I'll just say thanks, Abram, for wrapping that up and kind of weaving through all 6 of the presentations. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think you touched on something as important as well, and that's, agriculture is, as we know, such a context-specific thing, and what works in one place may not work in the other, but what does work in one place may work really well in the other. And I think that what you said is really key in the humility. Humility plus networks, I think, can be very effective to say, hey, what you're doing over there is working. Let's take that and try that. Or to on the contrary, to say, hey, what we're trying is maybe not working. And I think the combination of the two is really impactful. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just maybe 5 minutes before we have to go to the plenary session. So I don't know if there are any last comments or question that want to be raised. Mario is saying, I remember a quote from other events: "We do not scale technology, but we scale process," which I think it's very very valid and very relevant to our discussion. But if there are no more comments or feedback, I strongly encourage you to join the closing session of our event, because the idea is to have a brief summary of also of the discussion that took place in the parallel session, so you can have a glimpse of what was discussed. I mean, the key message. All the presentation and the session will be documented and published in the proceedings later on, so you will also access to this. And all the session have been recorded, so we will also share the link of the record, so you can also watch them later on. But just to conclude, I really would like to thank very much all the speakers and the participants for this afternoon. It was extremely rich and full of wonderful initiative and experience that we need to build upon and continue to research and to disseminate. So I look forward to see you in the plenary session for the closing ceremony, and to continue collaborating with all of you. Thank you again, and see you very soon.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.